Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order for our new board orientation. And Anthony, could you please call roll?
Yes, ma'am. Jack Feller, Tony Krantz, John Franklin, Paul McNamara, Jim Desmond, Dave Drucker, Joel Edson,
Here.
Rebecca Jones,
Here.
Priya Patel, I'm sorry. City of San Diego, there was no appointment made, absent.
All right, thank you, Anthony. And could you move on to the safety evacuation briefing?
Yes, ma'am. In the event of an emergency or evacuation, I will dial 911. In the event of evacuation, please do so using the stairs. Do not use the elevator. Once outside, please do not re-enter the building unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire extinguishers on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained in CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief.
Thank you very much. To the agenda.
No, ma'am.
All right, seeing none, and do we have any public speakers?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, and welcome to both new and returning board members. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen Tucholsky. I'm our Chief Administrative Officer. And in this presentation, my colleagues and I are going to be providing you with a brief overview of the NCTD operations and the roles of our respective divisions. So I'm going to go ahead and start things off, and then you're going to hear from the rest of my colleagues one at a time. And when we're all done, we're going to be here to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, Anthony, I'm struggling with the clicker here. Thank you. So I'm going to start off by providing just a brief overview of NCTD at a high level. We service approximately 10.7 million passenger trips per year. For fiscal 2019, our operating budget is $110 million, and our capital improvement program, or CIP, is $25 million. NCTD is responsible for 82 miles of track that support both freight and passenger rail. That reflects the combined total between the San Diego subdivision along the coastal corridor and the Escondido subdivision, which is our inland corridor. As you can see, we also maintain a robust fleet of revenue vehicles to provide our transit services. NCTD is a contracts oversight agency. You're going to hear this a couple times from my colleagues as we go along. And as you can see, of the 845 total employees, over 700 are contractor employees, and those are primarily with Bombardier and MV Transportation, who oversee bus, rail, and facilities. The pie chart on the right just reflects the breakout by division of the 134 direct NCTD employees. So I'll now provide a brief overview of the Administrative Services Division. We have 4 departments within the division. Administrative Services Department is exactly what it sounds like. We provide administrative services for all the district employees. As board members, the most important thing you'll see from us is the interaction with the board meetings. Anthony Flores, who is our manager of administration, is also our clerk of the board. So board agendas, anything regarding committee meetings, anything at all board related that you need, reach out to Anthony, and he and his team will make sure that we get you taken care of. Customer Service Department is headed by Brian Burkett. He's our manager of customer service, and he and his team are our front-facing point of contact with our customers. We have 3 transit retail ticket offices, Oceanside, Vista, and Escondido, as well as a call center. We handle the range of services, ticket sales, questions, comments, trip planning. And as a board member, takeaway for you all, of course, is that if you ever have any feedback or questions from your customers, please get them over to Brian, and we will be able to make sure that we get answers to those folks and help copy you and keep you in the loop and make sure that we're working together to address all of our customers' questions and needs. Human Resource Department is headed by Rose Jean Paul. She's our HR manager, and she and her team handle the full scope of HR services for our NCTD direct employees. In addition, we handle the drug and alcohol program management oversight for our contractor employees, Bombardier and MV, relative to ensuring FTA and FRA compliance with those program requirements. And last but not least, our marketing and communications department is headed by Kimmy Wall. She and her team handle all of the general marketing and advertising for NCTD services. In addition, they also oversee our Clear Channel contract, which handles all of the onboard transit vehicle. So the buses and the trains, when you look at them and you see the wraps on them or the ads on the inside or the outside, that's handled by Clear Channel. And that's a direct revenue contract. In fiscal 18, we brought in just under $1.4 million to the district via that contract. We also handle the website as well as media crisis communications. As our current board members will vouch for this, your most frequent communication with Kimmy will actually be on what we consider the crisis communications front. She'll send out notifications of any important service update information that we want the board to have. And this is typically when there's been a significant impact to our service that causes a delay or maybe a potential cancellation. And you'll see that that's generally on the rail side, unfortunately related to trespasser incidents along the rail lines. And then on the bus side, it's less frequent, but one example is when there were wildfires and many of our routes were on detours and delay due to that activity. So with that, I want to say thank you. I look forward to working with all of you, and I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Tracy Foster.
Karen's taller than me. Good afternoon. I'm Tracy Foster. I'm the Chief Development Officer. Within Development Services, we have two departments. Facilities and Project Management is one department that's led by Scott Luschke, and our Real Estate Department, which is led by Beth Freeman. Within the Facilities Department, we do all of the, it's broken into the two areas, which is the operations, so the daily maintenance and cleaning of our facilities. And those are outsourced contracts, so our quality control supervisors on the facility team do all of the oversight of the contractors. Bombardier Transportation is the primary provider of the facility services. They do all of our administrative offices, our rail facilities, transit stations and rail stations. MB does the maintenance for our bus operation facilities, as well as our bus stops. And we also have a number of specialty contracts to support the various types of equipment, whether it be HVAC or specialty janitorial service, landscaping, and such. So we have the number of facilities listed there below, the two administrative offices, the general administrative office, the building that we're in right now, and the second administrative office is our Tremont facility, which is located at Oceanside Transit Center. Our two bus maintenance facilities, known as East and West Division. East is in Escondido, and our West Division is here in Oceanside. We have three rail maintenance facilities, which is the Coaster Operations Facility that is on Camp Pendleton, and the Sprinter Operations Facility that's located in Escondido. And then we lease a facility here in Oceanside for our maintenance of way operations. And then, of course, as I mentioned, all of our rail stations. Our project management, we take care within the facility department of all of our facility projects to ensure we maintain a state of good repair. For fiscal year 19, we were funded $2.8 million for our projects. And some notable projects we are working on right now are some heater replacements at our West Division, our Solana Beach elevator modernization. We're working on a wayfinding master plan, project study report to support the infrastructure for zero emission buses. And at Oceanside Transit Center, we're working on a canopy roof repair. So quite a diverse realm of projects. Within our real estate department, we manage 62 miles of right-of-way. That right-of-way was acquired in the early 90s from Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, now known as Burlington Northern Santa Fe, BNSF. We operate from County Line through San Diego. Through Camp Pendleton, we operate under an easement from the base. We own the right-of-way from Oceanside to Del Mar, and MTS owns the right-of-way from Del Mar to San Diego. We have approximately 1,200 agreements, real estate agreements that vary from leases, licenses, easements. And of those 1,200, there's a little over 200 revenue producing agreements that bring in about $1.7 million annually to the district. The real estate department also does the vending and concession agreements at our facilities. And lastly, we control the access to the right-of-way. So there's always a lot of work going on the right-of-way, and we need to make sure that people are out there safely and that the work doesn't conflict with our operations. And so we have a review process for our permitting. So far this year, we've taken in 133 submittals and have processed 109. Once we process those permits, we also authorize then flagging protection or any other support services to be provided by Bombardier. And I will now turn it over to Yoon Park Lynch.
Good afternoon. My name is Yoon Park Lynch. I am the Chief Financial Officer, and I am I lead the Finance Division. The Finance Division is comprised of 4 departments: Financial Oversight, Accounting, Grants, and Revenue Collection. Financial Oversight, for the most part, is responsible for managing the finances of NCTD. We manage cash transactions and also the investments that are held in the local agency investment fund. We are also responsible for financial reporting, and we ensure that the financial transactions that are recorded in our books are in accordance with general set of accounting principles. We are subject to financial audits, and our books have to be recorded in accordance to GAAP, which is what I just said, the general set of accounting principles. And we also have to comply with government accounting standards, which are called GASB standards. Within the Financial Oversight Department, we're also responsible for preparing the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. The NCTD Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is abbreviated as CAFR, C-A-F-R, for the fiscal year 2018 has been completed. There will be a presentation later today regarding the audit results. That document is published on our website. That is led by the Financial Oversight Department. We are also responsible for reporting to State Controller's, the State Controller's Office, a report that's submitted by January 31st of every calendar year for the prior preceding fiscal year ended. And we're also responsible for reporting financial information to the National Transit Database. We are also, since we have financial oversight, we lead the financial information that's supplied for the auditors for the audit for the CAFR single audit. We receive over $750,000 a year in federal funding, so we are subject to single audit. And we are also subject to TDA triennial audits and Transnet annual audits. That audit is led by SANDAG, the San Diego Association of Governments. We receive funding from Transit every year, and we're also subject to ensure that those monies are spent in accordance to the Transit ordinance. The other department within the Finance Division is the Accounting Department. That department is led for the most part by our Assistant Controller, Derek Westerfeld. Under the Accounting Department are more like your transactional activities, the more traditional accounting related to accounts payable, accounts receivable, and payroll. Accounts payable is basically the paying the bills to our vendors, and accounts receivable is recording invoices for our customers. We bill a multitude of customers for different revenue sources, either social service agencies for fair revenue. We bill permits, leases, advertising, so that's done through the department. And we're also responsible for preparing the payroll for the approximately 134 employees that NCTD has. And as part of the accounting department, we are also responsible for the fixed asset management on the recording side. The majority of our capital projects are funded through federal funding and local funding, and we are required to track those assets based on funding source. So the Finance Division is responsible to ensure that those assets are tracked and recorded in accordance with funding requirements.
Madam Chair, I have a question. So am I supposed to push a button? I'm sorry, I'm very new.
No, you just need to
Okay, all right.
get.
Thank
yep,
you very
get in
much.
there.
I had a question on the finances and I guess the agreement and I'm brand new to this, so I'm going to use that for a long time. As
Is
an
your blue
excuse.
button on? Sorry,
My blue
Supervisor.
button?
Your blue button. Is it on? Okay.
It's green.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. On the finances that the money we get from Sandig, you mentioned there's $750 million that we get that I guess NCTD gets from the feds.
$750,000. We
750,000.
receive more than $750,000 a year, but the fact that we receive more than $750,000 makes us subject to a single
Oh, I
audit.
see. Okay. And then what's the ratio of the percentage of the Transnet dollars or transit dollars countywide that comes to NCTD? I guess what is there a split or an agreement between MTS and NCTD on what that is? And is that Sandag's rule or what?
So I don't know the percentage from the top of my head, but we receive approximately between $13 and $14 million from Sandag on an annual basis.
13 to 14 million?
Yeah, I can give you the exact amount that was budgeted, but
Well, is there an agreement or is there a?
There's a historic, because I've tried to historically figure out what the exact allocation basis.
And how long you been here?
10 years. 10 years.
Okay.
And we apply it on the Transnet. Let me answer this way, because Transnet gets, depending upon what pot you're talking about.
Not Transnet, Transit, I guess.
Well, different question.
Okay.
Okay, so Transnet is the local sales tax that Sandag has in place. So Transnet, there's varieties of different pots that are in place. Some of them are base operating pots that come to the district. Part of it includes the offset for the reduced fare program for the seniors, and then there's directed pots, and I'm not going to give you a specific answer, but then there are directed pots for specific services that are operated as capacity enhancing services. For example, there's a pot of money that will come to to MTS as a matter of the Mid-Coast project being constructed and placed into revenue operations. In terms of the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration dollars. So I'm trying to make it.
Are we getting our fair share?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So
Okay.
it's about a 70-30 split.
And we're getting that fair share.
Yes. We're getting our fair share. It's about a 70-30 split.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay. That's more. Thank you.
But
Right.
that's not legislatively in writing. That is just an agreement,
Yes.
correct?
Is it a handshake or is it written?
It's an agreement because that's one of the questions I've never seen anything that was a written document. I've never seen a written document that said the agencies have agreed to this forever and it was based upon this formula.
Okay. Thanks.
Feel free to jump in, everyone. I think it's easier.
The 70-30 split, do you know what it was ever based on? Is it population, ridership? Geography?
For me, it was in place, this was in place when I got here. And so it's not something that anyone has really desired to open up. Federal Transit Administration funding, quite frankly, it's a very complicated formula to come up with for funding. Bus funding is different from fixed guideway, actually, what we would refer to as either MTS's light rail system versus our commuter rail system. So the region hasn't done, to my knowledge, any kind of detailed analysis that said that based upon the existing Federal Transit Administration formula funds, based upon the different modes you would allocate, that you would divide it in this way. The money comes into this urbanized area, San Diego County, and then the money gets distributed by the MPO. So historically, there's been an agreement about how it gets allocated. I did spend some time initially taking a look at it. The allocation seems fine. I think generally, it's not an argument that either of the 8 transit agencies felt it was worth having, because both of our pots rise together.
Okay. But historically, I guess it'd be.
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
This is a very old agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably began with when NCTD was formed in the 80s.
Okay.
I got blue. Okay, I'm blue. I'm blue.
Mine's blue too, just so
Okay.
you know.
So I'm gonna, I'm going to claim newbie too. So wouldn't it be sound business practice for both parties to have this agreement in writing in some way, shape, or form?
Well, it requires more that there's also transit funding is not only distributed to the transit operators, it's also distributed to cities for road improvements. So it will require conversation of more than just the two agencies.
It really is a significant discussion that could end up with
Yeah.
winners and losers. So I think your comment is, should we memorialize the practice in writing across the applicable funds? And that's something that we will have the discussion with Sandag and MTS about doing, is memorializing the applicable funds that are relevant to the transit agencies.
Just one more, I mean, kind of as a follow-up to that, I mean, it would make sense, I think, to know why. I mean, things have changed since the 70s in North County.
Well,
Here's what my suspicion is. You guys are asking me this publicly. I don't believe there's a significant upside for the district to do that. Otherwise, I would have done that.
The other department that's under the finance division is the grants department. The grants department is led by the controller of fiscal projects and grants. The position is currently vacant. The main responsibility for the grants department is to oversee the day-to-day operations and accounting for grants. We have a multiple different funding sources, and we need to be able to track how those monies are spent. The majority of those funding sources are used for capital projects. So the funds are being tracked by funding source and by capital projects. We are also responsible for doing the billing and doing the collections. For the most part, most federal funding is managed through drawdowns. So there's no really sending a bill to the federal government, but we have to substantiate the drawdowns that we do on our federal funds. And the vast majority of the local funding is a combination of monies advanced or monies on a reimbursement basis. So the grants department is responsible to make sure that those monies are either drawn down from those advances or they are billed to the proper agency and do the follow-up on collections. We are also responsible for monitoring grant administration guidelines, requirements, and regulations. We prepare the status, milestone reports, and financial reports. We are required to report to the federal agencies at least on a quarterly basis. Once those grants are closed out, we do the final reporting. And some of our local funding, it varies. Some of them requires us to report on a quarterly basis, some of them on a semi-annual, some of them on an annual basis. So that's, we're responsible to ensure that those reports are filed in a timely manner. We are also responsible for developing the NCT capital element of the San Diego Regional Transportation Plan. We presented to the board back in December our proposed capital improvement program for fiscal year 2020. So that's a pretty long process. It's done through the budgeting process and also taking into account what we call the color money, the different funding sources, and what those funds are allowed to be spent on. And lastly, our revenue collection department is led by our controller of operations and fair revenue. And we are responsible for the day-to-day operations and cash management of a fair system. So we collect the cash from our ticket vending machines. Obviously, we don't collect, we manage the cash collected from ticket vending machines. We contract that collection to an armor services company. So we are the project manager for that contract. We're also responsible for overseeing the cash collection from the transit centers, doing change orders, replenishing change in the ticket vending machines, coordinating with our Cubic, which is the contractor responsible for the maintenance of our fare system to make sure that there's enough stock for example, the paper tickets. We also have share revenue agreements with Metropolitan Transit System, which is the San Diego operator. We have certain passes that can be used across the region. Behind those revenue collection, behind that share revenue agreement, there's actually a memorandum of understanding. So on a monthly basis, we reconcile, total, and allocate our revenue accordingly to that agreement. And lastly, we are also part of any implementation that takes place in the fare system. Sometimes it requires reconfiguration, new for products that go into our first system. And for upcoming next 2 years, MTS just recently awarded a new contract to implement a new first system. So our department is going to be, along with IT, we're going to be working, as a team to ensure that, everything goes as planned and the information is there in order to be able to do the share revenue account for all the monies that are coming to the district.
You and I have a quick question on that. So I had someone bring up to me that they were told that MTS and NCTD, that our two systems will not be communicating with one another. And so I know that staff has already covered this, but I just wanted to make sure that the rest of the board members knew that that is indeed not the case, that we are working with them so that there is, still the seamless transition to travel both systems.
Well, the plan is that we are going to both be on the same shared revenue share system.
Thank you so much for clearing that up.
Yeah.
I have a question. Am I supposed to be blue? Okay. The shared revenue, is that for the use of the rail only?
Well, we have share revenue agreements depending on the type of pass. We have, for example, there is a formula, for example, for the coaster monthly passes. You can use the coaster monthly passes across the entire region, both at the coaster, sprinter, bus, trolley. So there is a formula on how that revenue is allocated. We also have regional passes that can be used in the region, but do not include coaster. So they have a different formula, day passes. So we reconcile those on a monthly basis with MTS.
Okay, so this is revenue from passengers.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So I am going to now introduce Jake. Oh, sorry, I have one more slide. So here is, this is a recap of our amended operating budget that was presented to the board in December, just to kind of, especially for the new board members, to kind of give you an overview of where we spend our monies. The amended budget for fiscal year 2019 for the operating side is at about $114 million. If you see the graph, you can see that the biggest expense that we have is purchase transportation. That makes up about 56.7% of our total expenses. Purchase transportation is, for the most part, the contracts that we have with Bombardier for our rail operations and maintenance, and also with MB for bus operations and maintenance. So this includes not only running the coaster or running the buses or running Sprinter, but there's also a maintenance component in this contract, and that's part of the $65 million. The second largest expense that we have are professional services. That's about 16%. Professional services include the sheriff's contract that we have for maintaining the safety at our transit centers, and also, for law enforcement. It also includes the maintenance contracts that we have for our facilities, and also legal, auditing, engineering, electrical contracts. So anything that's a professional service, it's part of that $18 million. And then finally, the third largest expense, which trails, is our salaries and wages and employee benefits for our budget at 134.25 full-time equivalents. So that's about 11%, maybe 12%.
Just as a high level for board members, when it comes to the budget, our budget is not that complex, in the sense that since we contract out almost all of our services, all of those contract services are fixed price contracts. They're tied to service levels. So you can increase service levels and costs will go up based upon the rates in the contract, or you can decrease it and costs will go down. The annual contract cost increase, assuming a status quo, no increase in service, is capped at the San Diego area CPI. So we have cost containment in terms of our contracts. But so for us, from a year to year, from a budgeting point of view, we don't experience significant wild changes from the core of our operating services unless we are proactively deciding to either increase or decrease services. From a staff point of view, you saw in terms of the pie where we sit. So there's not a lot of places for us to change our budget. One item that I will make sure that I make note of is casualty and liability. The fact that we operate a railroad We're one of about 30 agencies in the United States that operate commuter rail. But what makes us different is the fact that we own the tracks and are responsible. So even for the tracks that MTS owns south of Del Mar, NCTD has operational control from Orange County border to Santa Fe Depot. And as a matter of that, we are required to carry $295 million worth of insurance. Not required, but it's the statutory cap that has been set by the federal government. So should we have a catastrophic event, the top of that limit is the $295 million worth of insurance that we have.
I have a question. I'm sorry, did you have a question? I know each entity is different, but do we ever look at if our percentages are similar to other transit agencies, or would that not be a
We do.
valid?
In fact, well, a couple of different, so if you were to go to our website, for example, we have a performance page that shows how we have benchmarked against other transit agencies. We also have provided access to a tool that will allow you to create many scenarios that you want to benchmark. But from a practical point of view, we're kind of unique in terms of the fact that we contract out all of our services. Most of the agencies that I've worked at, or most of the services are directly performed by direct employees of the agencies, with the exception of the fact that most agencies do contract out of 88 paratransit service. So we do benchmark, we do know if you were to look at a typical transit agency, about 80% of their cost would be labor. Now for us, you don't see the 80% labor cost because those labor costs are included in purchase transportation as part of the contracted services. Instead, you see the 11.9%, which just reflects the CTV staff that oversees
The pardon me, the track that goes beyond Santa Fe Depot, and our trains occasionally go past that. How is that?
That's MTS's tracks.
So are we must be covered.
Yeah, yes.
And
We have an
our
agreement.
Responsibilities don't end at Santa Fe Depot.
Well, so we have an agreement with MTS that allows us to store the trains in their yard. And so that's just codified in an agreement.
Sorry, keep hammering you here. Who owns the bluffs?
We own the tracks
We own the tracks that
and
are
the
on
right of way.
and the right of way on the bluffs.
Yeah.
The bluff
The bluff.
is owned by NCTD, Del Mar, and the state of California. State of California Torrey Pines Reserve owns part of that bluff. It just depends on how far east or west of the track you go and how far south.
Okay.
So there's.
So we're responsible for, this entity is responsible for the,
maintaining the bluffs as it relates to operation.
how much is the city of Del Mar chipping in? Okay. Nothing.
Okay, so now I will, that's not working. So Jacob Gold will do the presentation for legal counsel.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Gould, Senior Legal Counsel, currently the interim general counsel, while our general counsel, Lori Winfrey, is on extended leave. I'm going to touch briefly on just the department here because we're going to get into it in the governance side as well. So I don't want to bombard you with all of this. But generally, the responsibilities of the general counsel is to oversee all the legal matters, including litigation, oversight, claims activities. We're responsible for oversight and compliance with all applicable laws and regulations that apply to us, of which there are many. And we advise all departments and the board itself on any legal matter within our operational or jurisdiction. And on top of that, we review everything that comes to the board. Go ahead. An overview of the department. Myself, generally, I'm on the environmental, real estate, regulatory compliance side. Right now, I'm all of it. So all of it's coming in. Our senior planner, most of the cities, I think all the cities are have a phase 1 MS4, the stormwater permit. NCTD has its own phase 2 MS4 that we are responsible for implementing and keeping the water that runs off of our platforms and properties clean. Our senior planner heads that up as well as our stormwater program. Go ahead. Our claims and insurance specialist runs our government claims department. So any claim that comes into NCTD, that goes through our claims and insurance specialist. Most of our claims are on our operation side, so a slip and fall on the bus or something like that. And fortunately, because of our structure and the way that we contract out our services, we are somewhat insulated from those through our indemnity and insurance agreements with those operators. So what we're responsible for is really the things that happen on the coaster or on our property itself.
Jacob, one quick question of that. That would also include folks that are trespassing on our rail and on our within our right of way, or?
Yes, so we have, if there is an incident along the right of way, a strike or something else, we have various categories of a flow down within our shared use agreements with BNSF and Amtrak, as well as our operations contracts with Bombardier. So depending on who the actor was, what the occurrence was, that will dictate who owns that litigation. Fortunately, we have not had to buy any of those directly so far, knock on wood. And we've been able to turn some of those larger ones over to either Amtrak or BNSF.
But being that we own the track, that puts us in a position that's
We are
different.
always involved in that litigation, even if we're not directly paying for it, we're spending time and money to help defend it. So yeah, we don't let anybody just go off and run.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that for the new board members. Thanks.
Absolutely. And that leads us into the other side of the claims and insurance specialist is our insurance program. So as Matt said, we have a $295 million policy of insurance that covers our commercial general liability as well as our rail liability. Our property insurance is included in that. Basically, we have a $295 million book that covers pretty much everything that we do. The reason we cover such a high volume of insurance is because of the federal statutory cap. So within federal law, they basically said that any railroad owner or operator can be on the hook up to $295 million for any catastrophic event. And we don't want to keep a book and reserve of $295 million. We have stated good repair we'd rather spend that money on. So we buy insurance to cover that amount. And so that is also under the claims and insurance specialist. Our compliance officer basically runs our internal audit program as well as our CCOP, which is our comprehensive compliance oversight program. That's really been beefed up in the last couple of years and was very effective in our last Federal Transit Administration triennial review, where we received very minimal findings, none in procurement, right? None in procurement, which has been a marked improvement over the last round and has really been effective and bared some fruit. And then lastly, our civil rights officer administers our alphabet soup. And so this is where we get into our disadvantaged business enterprise, the DBE, the EEO, UNRRA, Title VI, basically all of our civil rights issues that we have to deal with as a public transit operator goes through that individual.
One quick question on that, Jacob. So the reason that we have to have a civil rights officer is through legislation, law, that is because we receive the federal funds?
So yes, we have, it's generally a good idea to have one in California, even if you don't operate, it's a good idea. But we are required to, under federal law and with our federal funds that we receive. So things like our DBE applications and stuff like that, those all require an individual with a direct line to the executive director.
Perfect. I'm just going to keep asking you leading questions
Totally fine.
as they come along, just so everyone really understands it. Thank you.
Totally fine. And that's the general overview of the general counsel department. We'll get into some of the structure and how that works in the next one, so I don't want to double dip on you guys. But if there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Ryan Cashin, who's our chief of IT.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Cashin. I'm the chief technology officer here. One of our main duties is to basically support all of the users and divisions throughout the district, make sure they have all the systems and tools to get their jobs done. While our IT staff may seem like a large number for one office with 130 something employees. One of our major customers are the other divisions. So for the first thing you think of with IT is just the basic IT stuff to support our users directly. This includes all the workstations, desktop applications, Microsoft Office, our internal phone system, and mobile devices. Behind that, we have all of the core infrastructure, which we do all in-house to support those functions. This includes full data centers, both here at Oceanside and also in Escondido. The normal Windows stuff, we host all of our emails, stuff in-house, databases. Microsoft Project Online is a large tool that we use to help give visibility into the status of a lot of our projects. The normal backup, server infrastructure, it's all done in-house, it's all located here. We also handle all the networking between all of our facilities, which includes the 8 major offices and all of the rail stations. Like I said, one of our main customers are basically all the divisions here at NCTD. So this includes anything from us being wholly being responsible for a system or being there for support and subject matter experts for the technology side of all of these pieces. Again, includes everything from our radio systems, dispatching systems. We have our own full call centers here, both for our customer service department and for ADA reservations. We're delving more into real-time info, but we are displaying predictions, locations, different things like that in our Google feed. We support the video systems district-wide, digital signage. JD Edwards has come to the IT division, so we're fully supporting our ERP financial system for finance. We do a lot of reporting, and as you mentioned, we are heavily involved in the entire fare collection system, and that's going to include the joint procurement, well, the use of the same system that MTS is using. So basically, overall, we do have our hands kind of in everything here at NCTD. And since I've been in this position, we've worked really hard to build our technology staff in-house. This has allowed us to bring a lot of the systems in-house, so there's more knowledge and responsibility with actual NCTD employees, as opposed to relying heavily on the contractors, which was done before. So it made it hard to get all that information settled. This also allows us to drive our projects forward, kind of with a knowledge of how all the systems throughout all of the divisions works. And it gives us the kind of rare view of having to see everything at once, all the pieces. So when other projects are doing divisions, it allows us to tie everything together and kind of see everything from a district point of view. So yeah, I'd like to now turn it over to Jennifer Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Jennifer Taylor, Chief Procurement and Contract Administration Officer. Oh, we're skipping over our Executive Director. Did I do that? Can we go back? I don't know how to go back. There we go. All right.
Yeah, so really what this is just pulling language that's directly from my employment agreement. You're going to hear from Jacob. The board directly hires and can directly fire 2 people. One of them is me and the other is the general counsel for NCTD. I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations under the district. I receive policy direction for the board. Board policy 19 specifies my authority. That's going to be something that Jacob will brief you on. The big picture for you guys is in terms of activities. Most of the activities that the board has delegated to me, I've sub-delegated to members of the staff team to execute.
Much like our cities, it kind of goes the same way. One thing, as outgoing board chair, I just want to make sure that you'll be going to the board retreat for Sandag this year.
Yes, ma'am, I will be going to the board
Perfect.
retreat.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. Is the restroom clean at the transit center right now?
It should be.
Well, you did do everything. You're in charge of
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Still Jennifer, Jennifer Taylor, Chief Procurement and Contract Administration Officer. The Procurement and Contract Administration Officer's division is responsible for the procurement of goods and services in support of the district. And we do this in accordance with federal, state, and local regulations, ensuring fair and open competition. We also administer the contracts all the way through closeout. And as Mr. Tucker mentioned, it's through the board policy 19 that delegates the authority to the executive director to enter into agreements up to $100,000, contract modifications up to $50,000, task order agreements up to $100,000, and contracts for the mitigation of emergency or exigent circumstances. Assembly Bill 3177 was signed into law on September 19th of 2018, and that realigned our contracting authorities under Board Policy 19 to increase our informal bid thresholds for materials, goods, supplies, equipment, and services to $100,000. It also granted the district express authority to opt into the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, which we will be bringing to the board in February. With that, I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Eric Rowe.
Hi, I'm Eric Rowe. I'm the Interim Chief Operations Officer for Rail. So Rail has 5 different departments. I'll discuss those departments. So there's Rail Operations. So as we talked about, we are a contract management organization. So Rail Operations oversees the coaster and sprinter operations modes, oversight of the engineers, conductors on the coaster, and the train operators and train attendants on the sprinter. Rail Mechanical, they are responsible for oversight of Bombardier for the maintenance of the equipment, so both the coaster equipment and the sprinter equipment, and then also the capital overhauls on both of those fleets. So they're both aging fleets, so we're doing quite a bit of capital work to bring them up to a state of good repair, especially on the sprinter side. And on the coaster side, we are buying 5 new locomotives. And so we're heavily involved in that process of the purchase of those locomotives. Maintenance away, so what Maintenance away does is they are responsible for the right-of-way. So that 62 or 82 miles worth of right-of-way we maintain. Responsible for the tracks, the bridges, the drainage, the culverts, and the right-of-way in general. So the track miles we have here is the actual track. So the 82 is the linear distance, but some places we have double track and even triple track in places. So that's where we get our miles. And then we have some state of good repair projects that we do in-house that Maintenance Way oversees as well. Rail Systems. So Rail Systems is responsible for positive train control, the project that I was mainly responsible for prior to this. Oversight of Bombardier contracts, so we're responsible for wayside signals, switches, and crossings. So some little facts there, 112 wayside signals, 121 switches, and 93 grade crossings. So we cover quite a bit there. And then rail engineering, it's more of a capital engineering for the rail. So their oversight for major capital state of good repair projects on the right-of-way, planning, design, construction, of NCTD and Sandag projects. Also some third-party projects. The Navy is doing a project on us right now. So we oversight of that. We implement our design criteria manual. So we have a set of design criteria that we give to Sandag that they have to meet to be able to design stuff onto NCTD's property. And then administration of our bridge management plan. We are a railroad of bridges. We have a lot of bridges. Some of them are very aged. And so the FRA has a requirement of a bridge management plan. We do bridge inspections. And again, that's contracted out.
Eric, before you move on, could you just go over PTC, positive train control, real quick, and with just a little bit about it and that we met the deadline?
Yes, so positive train control is federally mandated after essentially the Chatsworth crash in 2008. It was originally required to be done in 2015 and changed to 2018 with a possibility of a 2-year extension. It prevents train-to-train collisions, overspeed derailments, incursions into work zones, and transversing misaligned switches. And that's the 4 things it does. So if there's a passenger car stuck on the tracks, PTC doesn't know about that, but it will prevent 2 trains from coming together. NCTD and all of our tenant railroads are operating PTC at this time. We met the deadline of 2018. We're one of 4 railroads in the nation that have met that 2018 deadline, and there was 41 railroads that were required to complete PTC. So all the other railroads, besides the 4, have gotten extensions for 2 years to take them out to the end of 2020.
And kudos to staff for making that happen because, like you said, only 4 out of the entire country. It's quite significant. So thanks for all your hard work on that.
The other, I'm not sure how the Amtrak, Circle Line, Metrolink, I'm not sure if they're all involved. The other trains that are using the same tracks, like the Coaster is using, do they have positive?
Yeah, so
are they part of the group that has positive train control?
So they are all implemented on our territory. So Amtrak nationwide isn't implemented everywhere, but on our territory, they do run PTC. BNSF Freight runs PTC. On our territory, they all run PTC. Yep. And I will introduce Sean Loughborough, our Chief of Safety and Security.
I'm sorry, Eric, I didn't know you were going to be finished. The maintenance of the right-of-way, you cover that. Is that include things like graffiti and?
Yes.
all
So
those things?
graffiti, weed abatement, fence repair, all of that is part of the right-of-way.
And how are you notified of the graffiti?
So 2 things.
The need.
Right. So 2 things. We do track inspections twice weekly over the entire territory. So those track inspectors are responsible for noticing all the graffiti as part of their and culverts and myriad of other things. Our train operators that are out there report that in. The general public reports things in, and some city code enforcement reports things. So we get reports in-house we go see that. And plus our right-of-way officers are out there as well, NCTD staff, and we find that, and then just general NCTD staff sometimes finds things as well and notifies us.
I know because I probably call in at least nearly a couple thousand times a year in Oceanside. So not on you, but as far as graffiti. So I was.
In the graffiti in our contract with Bombardier, they have 5 days to abate graffiti unless it's vulgar. And then it's a 24-hour, they have to get out there and abate the graffiti.
If it's gang related, do you call anybody in to take pictures?
So we defer to Sean if we're still using that, but we.
Thank you.
And Jack, I'm in charge of the bluff.
You're in charge.
It's obvious. I saw you on the news yesterday.
A couple other things just to continue that discussion on graffiti. So we are also involved with San Diego 211. So North County Transit District is registered on that website for graffiti. So if somebody wants to either call or go onto that website to report, that's another reporting mechanism that somebody can report graffiti. The 24-hour graffiti removal also includes safety items. So for example, somebody sprays over one of the aspects, over one of the train signals, or over a sign that says, beware of trains, something like that. So that would also fall under sort of the 24-hour requirement. In addition, we do work with the San Diego Sheriff's Office. If there is something that's gang related, we receive inquiries from law enforcement to say, hey, we work in a case with specific graffiti types or an artist, as they like to refer to themselves. And we've successfully worked with other law enforcement agencies in that, as well as we can use our contract with the San Diego Sheriff's Department if required to do some investigation there. So just as a follow-up to that.
Sean, one other point on that. So that's graffiti tracker, I'm assuming, because the Sheriff's Department, and that makes it then the specific instances add up to, or can add up to if they have the monikers that attach them to other graffiti so that it becomes a felony versus.
Correct. So
yeah.
NCTD itself is not part of graffiti tracker, but we can use the resources of the Sheriff's Department. That is
right,
correct.
Through our contract.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Does that answer? Do they share? We participate in invest. I'm not sure of that question. I don't. They have access. I'm not sure how they actually use it. I just know we have received inquiries from especially the most recent one was in Vista, where we got an inquiry on tracking a particular case, and we were able to support the documentation that we had on that. Good afternoon. Sean Lufborough. I'll talk safety and security. So two big departments that I do have. I have 20 employees that work for me. I have 4 on the safety side and 16 on the security side. My primary deputy is Deputy Chief of Safety and Security is Jaime Becerra. He's my subject matter expert for all things security. He has 9 employees that report to him. They are the control center technicians. What the control center technicians do is they essentially work in the monitoring center, which is a location at Oceanside Transit Center, as well as the operations control center, which is in our Sprinter operations facility in Escondido. They provide security and emergency response coverage. So they help with our closed circuit TV system. They answer the emergency call boxes that you'll find on our platforms and some of our other stations. They'll also man the telephone calls for our security hotline, which is the 6700 number. So those are all the control center techs. That's a 24/7 position. So no matter what time of the day or day of the week, that position is manned, and they're there to help support any calls or any issues that we have on the system. In addition, the other security report that I have is Tim Cutler. He's the director of the Operations Control Center. He has 5 employees that work strictly at the Operations Control Center in Escondido, and they're in charge with communications and emergency management. So for those of you that are aware, we have a text system that we page out issues, challenges, or other information that goes to not only our employees, agency employees, but contractors as well. They perform that system. They also work with the other members of the OCC, which include the rail dispatchers, the bus dispatcher, as well as those control center technicians, and help manage any service management issues that we may have, especially if it's multimodal. So if there is an issue on the trains, for example, we have to have a bus bridge, we have the bus dispatcher right there, and we're able to continue that support seamlessly to make sure we can get our customers moved safely and effectively. Overall, my budget is about a little over 5% of the operational budget, about $5.7 million. See if this works. There we go. On the safety side, I have 4 safety specialists. I have a rail system safety specialist, a bus safety specialist, a field safety specialist, which is in charge of going out and looking at the construction projects as well as major projects along the right-of-way and capital improvement programs. And then I have a system safety and compliance officer that is my lead auditor and also is in charge of our safety database. Again, we want to make sure that we're following all the rules correctly. So regulatory compliance is a strong requirement that we do, and the rail is very heavily regulated by both federal and state entities. I also manage the safety plan, which is the ISMSP. For those of you that were here in December, that is required to be approved by the board of directors. The reason is the board of directors has direct involvement in the budget, and this is an FTA law that says it has to be approved by the board of directors to make sure that there's enough money allocated to safety programs. I also manage the internal safety and security audit program, as well as the risk register meetings and conduct hazard management. Our entire safety plan is built around the safety management system principles. We want to get things as hazards before they become accidents and incidents, and we want to be predictive rather than reactive. The security department major oversight that they have is for the emergency response plan that dictates how the agency will resolve and or conduct operations during an emergency, as well as our system security and emergency preparedness plan. We have 3 memorandums of understanding for law enforcement services. Our primary is with the San Diego Sheriffs. That provides us with 7 deputies, 1 sergeant, and 1 administrative assistant for 24/7 coverage anywhere in our service area. We also have memorandums of understanding with the City of Oceanside and the City of Escondido for additional officers at our 2 top transit centers, Oceanside Transit Center, as well as Escondido Transit Center. Security department, as I alluded to in the OCC, also helps perform service management, emergency management, and we do the closed circuit TV monitoring. Pending any questions, that's all I have, and I'll hand it off to Damon Blythe, our Chief of Transit Planning and Bus Operations. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I guess you mentioned that at the different transit centers, you have officers there. Are they, I don't know.
At the top 2 armed law enforcement officers from the city, and they're there to help make sure that everybody's following the appropriate rules and regulations that we have, not only our ordinances, but well as other.
So you have Oceanside and Escondido PD? Is that
That's correct.
So
Yes,
go-
sir.
And I guess we're paying them for that service.
It's an overtime. That's right. So it's an overtime that they put out and then posted. So we have a pot of money that's allocated for them to provide that coverage for us.
Then how about on the I don't know, the buses, if you need them or not, but on the coaster and or the Sprinter, is there, what's the
So the sheriffs
protocol?
do law enforcement and security services for us as well. We also have some employees that are contracted employees that perform some of those functions as well. So we have the train attendants, for example, on the Sprinter, the ride in the back, separate from the vehicle operator. They do fare enforcement to make sure that folks are boarding our services with the appropriate fare. And if there's issues, they are able to talk with the Operations Control Center. And if we need to, we'll call local law enforcement to support them. The conductors perform the same activity on the coaster trains. And then on the bus system, the operator itself right by the fare box.
Yeah.
And again, our policy is state the fare, repeat the fare, and then move on. If they need to, there's different policies and procedures that they have that they will notify us that they have somebody that doesn't have fare. And then we can use the sheriff's department or other law enforcement activities to help track those folks and other security activities.
Well, and I appreciate the collecting the fares. I'm a coaster rider now. So what if you get some belligerent, some drunk? How do you deal with that?
So if there's a problem passenger, typically it's resolved. We'd like to do it at the lowest possible level. So if it's on the train, more than likely it'll be the conductor on the coaster or the train attendant on the Sprinter. And on the bus, it could be the operator. At that point, if they're able, through good use of customer service and de-escalatory techniques to try to resolve the issue, if not, they're going to phone a friend. And typically that first call is going to go to the Operations Control Center, either through the engineer or the conductor, let them know we have an issue. On the side of the bus, we have road supervisors that'll come out. They're able to meet the bus in the field. So that would be the next level on the bus side, is to try to de-escalate the issue and resolve. If it's something that's more critical right away, they contact the control center technicians who call local law enforcement. So those will arrive to wherever the issue is and see if they can help resolve the issue.
So what if you got somebody, and I don't know, I'm just coming up with this scenario, somebody gets on in Carlsbad and then they're belligerent and you need to get them off the train or something like that. So maybe I guess there's not a stop in Del Mar, but Solana Beach, so you want to get this person or whatever off the train. So who is it? Do you call the local law enforcement?
So typically that's correct, the local law enforcement. So if there's an issue at Carlsbad and they're proceeding, let's say eastbound, which is geographically south. So the next stop would be Encinitas.
Okay.
In that case, that's the San Diego Sheriff's Department. That's who has jurisdiction there. We would say, hey, we have a problem passenger on the coaster. It's due in 5 minutes. Do you have somebody available to either help resolve the issue or help the customer realize they need to pay fare, not be rude, whatever that current issue is? And if that could be mitigated with the conductor, that's our ultimate goal, is to try to keep it at the lowest level possible. But we do have, sort of a tiered response as necessary. But the first on scene is typically local law enforcement. Then we have our contracted law enforcement officials. If it's at Oceanside or Escondido, we'll have some law enforcement there, ideally that's right there on the spot. And then depending on our San Diego sheriffs that work throughout our entire system, they can also be there to respond.
And then you mentioned your closed circuit TV. I imagine you have cameras at the different stations. Is there cameras on the Sprint on the actual?
There is
coaches?
cameras on all of our revenue vehicles as well.
Inside on.
That is correct.
Okay, good.
And we're able to use that to help document that type of behavior for further adjudication in the judicial process, if required.
So it's on the Sprinter. It's on I guess the coaches on the coaster buses as well.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks.
So, and just to go a little bit further to that, on the coaster, you saw on one of the slides a wireless mesh system. So we have the capability of seeing real time during the actual operations. We can see the actual engineer as he's operating. We can see what he sees, and we can see passengers. So when you've been naughty on the train, we actually are able to spot you.
Your train was
out
dripping
every
on me
day.
the other day. Okay.
It was on Facebook up close on some of those photos.
Was that? No. But
Sean, there is a question I have regarding the Sprinter. When you have two connected trains, I have a grandson that rides almost every day over to Escondido and back. And they had the trouble happened after the rail employee went to the other car.
Mm.
And there was nothing that could be done, and I think kid got beat up.
Something on the revenue vehicle. So there's emergency call box. There should be a vehicle operator there. And you said it was parked at a transit center?
No, this was, there's 2 cars on the Sprinter many
Correct,
times,
yes.
connected.
That's right.
One.
That's correct.
There is.
The train attendant can only be in one at a time.
Exactly.
That's
and
correct.
That's what happened. The guy waited till he went in the other vehicle before.
Yeah, they're also supposed to cycle through, so they're not hanging out in one. So they're supposed to go back and forth to help mitigate that issue. But there's also call box in the revenue vehicle that could be in contact with the vehicle operator. So that would be one option. 2 would be to call the security hotline and let somebody know. Or 3, physically go to the other car if you're at a station and go, hey man, I got some issues in car number 1. You're hanging out in car number 2. Could you please come and help?
Yeah, I think my point is that has to be considered if
Absolutely.
it happens in a longer stretch.
Absolutely.
One quick question to follow up on that. So if there is a situation, there is the phone number that folks can call.
Yes.
Is it possible to then, for us in real time, because you mentioned that we could see some things in real time
On some modes, that's correct.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is if, for instance, his grandson had called and then we were able to get the attendant back, but in that interim time frame, is there taping that goes on with that?
That's correct. So it's
Okay.
recorded on board the video. They have they're able to store multiple days worth of data. And then at the end of the day, we can pull that. The Sprinter, unfortunately, we don't have real time right now, but they do have a recording system that can record a certain amount of days of data. And that's on the buses as well as the coaster. So we can actually go and pull that video and we still provide it to local law enforcement.
Right,
So
for
the most important
enforcement,
thing
right.
is to make sure a report is made that we know about it, number 1.
Right.
And then that generates from our end a video request that goes to the contractor to make sure we have that revenue vehicle video. And then we provide it to the local law enforcement, whoever has the case. And then they're able to view it with us or by themselves.
Or you can hope somebody like me sitting on a train waiting for that.
Well, hopefully we won't be. Hopefully we won't be waiting for that. Do we have any signage that tells people that we have video that is being taped? I'm just thinking it might be a deterrent. I don't know. I mean, I never really thought about it until he just brought that up.
There is
right
some in some locations. I'd have to go, sort of line by line, but I know we do have some signage that says video, video in progress or video monitoring is in progress.
Yeah, I think that might be something that we might look into to.
We just
have
want to make sure
for
it's
them.
accurate because
Of
if you put a
course.
sign up without a camera, that
Of course. Yep.
some other transit agencies have had issues with that.
Of course. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I'll hand it off to Damon. Thank you very much.
In the intervening time. Good afternoon. I'm Damon Blythe. I'm the Chief Operations Officer, and I handle transit planning and bus operations. So to tag along to the camera discussion, the newest series of buses that we bought, they're 2701, 2702, they actually have a monitor right over the operator. So as a passenger, when you board the bus, there's a camera pointed right at your face, and your face shows up right in that monitor. So it's, as a deterrent, you're being video recorded, and it's very plain for you to see that you're being video recorded. All the buses we're procuring from now on have that feature as well. So I oversee two departments, as I said before, transit planning and bus operations. So for bus operations, that also includes fleet maintenance for all of our rubber-tired vehicles, so buses, cutaways, vans, and our non-revenue vehicles. So we have a contract with MV Transportation. It's a 7-year fixed price contract with a 3-year option. We're currently in year 2 of that contract. So MV is responsible for operating and maintaining our fixed route buses, which is called Breeze, our deviated fixed route, which is called Flex, that sort of serves Camp Pendleton and Ramona, and then our on-demand paratransit service, which is called Lyft, federally mandated complimentary paratransit service. So they operate, maintain, and dispatch that. They provide operators, vehicle maintenance technicians, and cleaning the vehicles and dispatching the vehicles. And then also that department is responsible for procuring and managing capital project implementation. So that could be anything from new buses, overhauls of major components on our buses like engines and transmissions, assisting the DSD department with things like the electric bus infrastructure study, assisting with the bus wash maintenance and replacement. And then the other department that I oversee is the service planning department. So the service planning department plans and schedules all of our fixed route and deviated fixed route bus routes, and also schedules those buses. Then we're also responsible for scheduling the coaster and sprinter trains. We don't really change the schedule on sprinter, but if we ever were to, it'd be my department that would be handling that. And then also we work with Amtrak and Metrolink to schedule coaster because we all share the same set of tracks. That department is also responsible for maximizing our operational cost effectiveness. So every 6 months, we change the bus schedule, make small tweaks to make it more efficient, operate at a lower cost. That happens in April and October. It coincides with the schedule change that happens with Coaster. So Coaster, Amtrak, and our Breeze system all change schedules all at the same time. We also perform monitoring and reporting for all the modes, looking at on-time performance, cause of delays, are looking at the miles and hours of revenue service we provided. And then we also work with the Development Service Department to make recommendations for bus stop locations and features, and then also adding and removing stops. And we were supposed to wait until the end to go to questions, but I can do questions now.
Do we have any questions? I think we actually
Pretty
asked them
straightforward.
already. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, thank you. Okay, moving on. There's no vote on this item. It was just an informational item. Jacob Gould, our senior legal counsel, will review item number 2,
All right, so
structure and summary.
I'm back.
Always take it.
So we're going to take a very quick sort of 30,000 foot level of the agency overview, the governance structure, and our board policies. So I will try to stay fun. Some of it's really dry, but we'll give it a go. So the district was created in 1975, as we talked about before. We had a nearly unpronounceable alphabet soup at the beginning. We're now North County Transit District, which is much easier to say. We were initially formed to conduct public transit systems in the area of our jurisdictions. Originally, that was mainly bus. That has since expanded. Our enabling legislation is found in the Public Utilities Code. We have this on all of our onboarding. I tell everybody, if you have young kids at home, you can't get them to sleep, this is a good one to read to them. There's about 30 sections. Most of it is pretty cut and dry in terms of the authority related to a special district. However, there are some that are unique to us, and we'll get into what those are as we go through. But mainly our main purpose is to operate the transit system. We adopt an annual budget, fixed compensation. We have an administrative code, which we adopt through our policies and procedures. That you can think of that as your cities has a municipal code. Our policies and procedures is essentially the same thing. We do our post audits, advisory committees as necessary. We'll do that today as well. And then the last one is the fun one. It's do any and all things necessary to carry out our purposes. So that's kind of the catch-all. A lot of the cities have a similar one, and this is ours.
I have a quick clarification question on that. So does it specifically point out or spell out that North County Transit District is a district in its own right? Like, does it talk specifically about us? So if there was ever discussion of a merger or something like that, is there statute or law that actually protects that there would have to be a certain specific path, how that would work?
Yes and no. So with cities, you're either a general law city or you're a charter city, and that's either defined the way that you were incorporated or your grant from the legislation. We are a district, and the board is incorporated with a specific jurisdiction, and that is by statute. So that would have to be amended. Where we get in, depending on other statutes, is what we are: a special district, a transit district, a public agency, because we are all and separate of those things.
So just to clarify that, so all of the members of North County Transit District, which are all of us that are seated here today, we would have to make a decision on something like this, or I'm just.
It
I'm
would
not sure I
depend
understand.
on the legislation. So our jurisdiction and our enabling legislation comes from the state.
If you look like at Senate Bill 1703, which is going up, and then AB 805, those were done by the legislature, and for NCTD to be disbanded would take the legislature to do that. MTS, Sandag can't do that. The city of San Diego can't do it. It is the state legislature that basically created us and can basically eliminate us.
Thank you.
No problem.
So I wanted to say one thing on that too. So to go back a little bit to your question. So one of the things that, when I came here, because like literally I tell people, I had not heard of this transit district, and that's no disrespect to this transit district when I interviewed for it or was told that the job was available. This transit district is a very unique transit district. If you start ticking down, and you're going to see in the future months as we do presentations, we are one of 5 transit agencies in the country that operate hybrid rail. That's the Sprinter system. One of 30 that operate the commuter rail system, and we're in the top 200 in terms of bus system size. I will tell you, as somebody, in a former life, I ran a statewide agency for Virginia for rail public transportation, statewide transportation demand management. And I've worked all over this country. City of Phoenix, I was deputy public transit director, chief operating officer for the transit system in San Jose. I can tell you, when you go around the country, people die for the assets. Cities die, they work hard to get the assets that we have in North County. And one of the reasons when people ask me, having been here, and if you take a look historically, one of the reasons NCTD was created was because of the fact that if you look at kind of how the lay of the land use within San Diego County exists, where we abut up against Orange County, Camp Pendleton, and then you have this area sort of south of Del Mar, and you have our service area at abutting out against Camp Pendleton. Well, historically, when you look at MTS, which abuts up against Mexico, and it serves a significantly larger population, the issue was likely that led to the creation of the 2 separate transit districts in 1975 was the fact that they wanted to make sure there was a public transit service for North County residents. And if you go and read all of the documentation and enabling legislation, is written around for public transportation services for North County residents. And that's what people sort of lose sight of it. And so I will give you my kind of straight talk on everything. So if you never have any issue about money, so if there's infinite pots of money, then you never have to worry about any tough decisions. I hope to live in a world that way one day. But the fact of the matter, if you're in a world where you have finite resources, and I say this as a professional that's worked, all over the place, from a transit perspective, you always are financially constrained. And when you're financially constrained, that means you have to make choices about routes and services that are provided. And like everything that we do, we look at what provides the most bang for the buck. So walk in wisdom as you think about what is the future of NCTD, because the agency was created for a specific mandate to meet the economic and public needs of citizens in North County. One of the things that we're going to do to help you guys understand that, we have a study, a consultant is doing a public benefit study, and he's going to capture the benefits from an economic, environmental, and all other perspectives that the transit district provides the region. But that's kind of the understanding of, you go like, well, why didn't they just create one system? It was just because of the fact, if you look at the population differences between the areas and the differences in terms of the land use. And also just note, and this is something that's important for you guys to understand, there are only a few points of connectivity within our transit system. And so the points of primary connectivity are Escondido on those BRT lines. You got the 101 bus that runs along the coast that runs into UTC, and you have the coaster. Those are the primary points of connectivity. So over time, we will introduce you to more and more of the services, but we don't have systems that significantly overlap. Now you can have it back.
Well, one thing I'd like to add to that. So just, thinking this through, we do have the 70-30 that historically has been happening, although it's not written in writing anywhere. So just think about that kind of moving forward, how that fits into Matt's whole discussion of what the district was created to do.
I would like to add, the 3 of us were at League of California Cities, and the new director of executive director at Sandag made a statement about the Sprinter has to go or something like that. And I'm sure,
So I had
he
a,
says, whose idea was that? Essentially, so.
so I did have a conversation.
He clarified to me that his comment was about frequencies, that the service should be more frequent. He's a new person to this job, so I'm not gonna judge all the comments that he makes about it, you know, full-time job. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, when you start looking at other hybrid systems, and you'll see it in the presentation up here, that Sprinter system that we have is one of the most effective hybrid rail systems in the country. And you'll see it in terms of performance factors, ridership. And I'll make a note from you that 22 miles of Sprinter costs $500 million to include vehicles, facilities, everything. 22 miles. The 11 miles for that mid-coast project, $2 billion project. So this region has nothing to feel bad about when we look at the effectiveness of the Sprinter in terms of making that move. We've already provided quantifiable analysis when we shut the Sprinter service down.
Yeah.
That the Sprinter is far more cost effective for us than when we run a bus. The quality of service and the efficiency and effectiveness, we were able to document it, part of that.
Let me make a couple comments here.
Feel free.
Think back to 1975, what San Diego County looked like. And there was a huge divide. Rancho Bernardo was just starting at that point. There was no Carmel Valley. It was basically
Not Del Mar Heights or?
Del Mar Heights was starting, but you know, Solana Beach was just starting. I mean, basically there was this huge divide. There was also at least 3 bus companies up here. There was Oceanside, Escondido, and probably another one. And they were all kind of running independently. Bill Craven, who was the founder of this, basically decided to consolidate. The other thing is on the Sprinter, the reason we did the Sprinter was very simple. The feds told us, you have to come up with a very inexpensive way to build this. Otherwise, we're not going to fund it. And it was the least expensive light rail implementation ever. And that's how we got the funding. Otherwise, we would have never been able to get that Sprinter funded, period.
Amen, brother.
Sorry, Jacob, we really took that off the rails, but
this is what we're here for.
thank you. Yep.
So jumping into our first major change was Senate Bill 1703. This was back in 2003. This was the local and minor transfer of capital projects. So this went to Sandag. Both MTS and Sandag essentially MTS and NCTD turned over major capital projects to Sandag to run that. NCTD continued to operate the Breeze, Coaster, and Sprinter, and we implemented what we called local and minor projects, those state of good repair type things, through our board directly. Just to touch on Sandag, for those of us in the room that aren't intimately familiar with them, they're our Metropolitan Planning Organization, what we call our MPO, and they're the regional transportation planning agency for San Diego County. They're required by state and federal law to put together the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or the RTIP, every 2 years, and that's a multi-year program of proposed capital projects that really touch on everything. And as we talked before on the Transnet program, that's implementing that RTIP. And so that's where we put in sort of our wants and needs, and hopefully they get it higher on the priority, and they get implemented through that program.
One thing I too would like to, interject real quick. So Sandag also is the one who decides, and as a board, where the money is allocated countywide. So just thinking about our role here in North County to get our fair share, we need to make sure we have folks on that board that are willing to work for our best interest here in North County, because traditionally, if you look at some of the road projects specifically, North County hasn't gotten really its fair share, in my opinion. So anyway, just to throw that out there, but just thinking about receiving our 70-30 split, we don't have that in writing. So thinking at North County Transit, how that translates, it's very important that we have board members at Sandag that are looking out for North County Transit specific needs.
Let's have a comment on your slide with the alphabet soup.
Mm-hmm.
The RTIP is a 2-year funding program. It's what gets funded and that's done every 2 years. The RTP is the multiple year program of proposed highway aerial. So your the way I
correct.
understand Sandag is the third bullet it's the RTP, not the RTP.
You are correct. That is a typo. I do apologize.
Yeah, and yeah, so it's alphabet soup, but it
So the reason that I bring up 1703 is because this plays into a myriad of agreements that the district and Sandag and MTS and Sandag have done over the years. It started with what we called the initial transfer. This was when we had our own staff and engineers that did our own capital projects moved to Sandag back in 2003. That was the initial transfer. Every implementation of each capital project at that point was done by an amendment to that master MOU. We did 17 of those and figured that that was really an efficient way to do business. So then we had a addendum 18, which essentially said, okay, here are the confines for what we're going to do for a transfer project. Here's the general rules and the way that we're going to do it. And the Exhibit A to this addendum 18 to our master MOU will be the form that we use to transfer those. So you'll hear that a lot when we come in for capital projects. Hey, this is going to be done under an Exhibit A. That is what we're referencing here. It's the Exhibit A to addendum 18 to the master MOU. So talk about alphabet soup, and we've got quite a bit of it. So in a nutshell, that's what it boils down to. Oh, all right. I'm sorry.
I'm going to keep pushing the new guy button.
Sure.
I wasn't around when SB 1703 came in. Was that who authored that? Who authored that bill? Do you remember?
Yes.
Oh, that was Steve Pease?
Yes, Steve.
Ah,
So
okay.
This was, unfortunately.
Was this a hostile takeover?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right.
Well, basically, I was on the board. Basically Sandag created a group, including MTS, that was MC, Metropolitan Transit District. So MTD, NCTD, and Sandag. We went out, we explored how other regions were handling the region. And we were supposed to come back with a recommendation. And basically, by that time, MTS and Sandag decided that they were going to do this, and they kept NCT out of it. And MTS basically didn't fight it much. So, basically, we were railroaded.
It changed the voting structure. It changed everything.
Well, yeah, basically it changed everything. And basically, the interesting thing is by us not having the ability to handle what our major projects are, that interferes in some ways, changes the way we do maintenance. And that's not the best.
Okay.
And then also, it changed the way Sandag worked, but that in turn.
So this is okay. I never heard of 1703 before.
Well,
1703 basically created the concept of the representation by area. So there's the coastal area, North Coastal, North Inland, South Inland, and South Coastal, and created those reps. Put two reps from the San Diego on it.
Did that bill also take the airport from the port? It was the same year, somewhere.
I think so. Yeah.
But they did it. They got that later. Okay. Wow. All right.
So one thing, and
Good history lesson.
Mr. Tucker could actually correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think that part of the legislation, what we're feeling today, has to do with our control over projects and then also cost containment. I don't think I'm wrong on that, but just.
Well, yeah, and I'm not sure. Well, obviously, the region when 1703 was enacted, the region really didn't have full knowledge of what they were doing, the impact of the changes. So for us, you're going to hear us talk about two things a lot: safety, and that may be a little bit of annoyance, but if God forbid, if we have an event, it's like an airline industry event for us, it's catastrophic, very impactful. The other piece is the fact that we are designated essentially as the railroad of record. So no matter who's working, operating on the railroad right away, we're the ones who are in charge, and we're the ones who are going to be held accountable for what happens. And so for with us, it's been a work in progress because I came in after 1703, and it was a significant change because all of the engineers that NCTD had on staff responsible for railroad were transferred down to Sandag. And I don't know who cut the deal, but along with that, we were transferring at that time, I believe, close to $1 million a year to Sandag. Well, as the owners of the railroad, there's no construction work or any activity that anybody can do for which the owner doesn't approve and have to provide direct oversight of. And so we had to go through a process where 1703 was supposed to bring cost effectiveness. We transferred responsibilities and money to Sandag, and then had to turn around and hire engineers to provide oversight, because that's our regulatory responsibility to provide the oversight of the railroad for them. So it's been a work in progress. Things actually are moving much better. We've adopted some standards to try to minimize it. I think what Chair Jones is referencing is that there's a big gaping hole when it comes to projects that are locally funded by Sandag. And we've had the example of a bridge, and it's Los Penasquitos Bridge, where there was a significant cost overrun for that bridge. Sandag was the implementing agency, and there's a massive discussion about who's responsible for that significant cost overrun for project.
Significant might be an understatement, but I'll let that go. One other thing is just to point out, if you didn't catch that, so we're actually paying more than our $1 million transfer. We're actually paying because we have staff members that still have to have the oversight on these, because we have the responsibility in the end. However, we're still paying Sandag to do that job, but we're ultimately responsible. So we're actually doing it twice. I mean, would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, we try to. I can tell you over time, we've optimized it to avoid some of the duplication, and we've developed standards so that we can manage exactly what Sandag does and that everything is being built in accordance. But it has been a work in progress to get to this point, but I do feel like we've made significant progress with that.
Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, this is our pretty picture in the break in words. So the direct district governance starts with the board. All of the power in our enabling legislation goes directly to you as the board. We have various ways we can implement that police power. The first one we have is our laws, and that's our ordinances. These may not be waived even by the board. They may be changed or updated, rescinded by the board, but they cannot be waived. They would require the adoption of a new or amended ordinance. We have 3 currently on the book. Ordinance 3 establishes all our rules and regulations for all our property and modes. Ordinance 4 is a personal merit system with minor exceptions. We don't have CBAs here. And so this is all delegated through that merit system. And Ordinance 5 regulates the parking within the parking lots. Not currently implemented in terms of managed or paid parking, but that is on the horizon. Go ahead next. As Matt mentioned earlier, we have 2 direct hires or reports for the board. The executive director and the general counsel are the 2. Go ahead. As Matt said, the executive director's responsibilities is the general oversight of the agency as a whole, making sure that everything runs smoothly, short-term, long-term goals. The biggest takeaway from this is board policy number 19. This is the direct delegation of authority and the only delegation of authority from the board to anyone else. So if it's not in board policy 19, it does have to come to you for authorization. The other direct employee is the general counsel. We kind of went over the requirements there. Go ahead and skip through that one. The general counsel is the legal advisor on all official powers and duties of both the board and staff members on all projects. And there's also the attorney-client privilege attaches directly to the board, not any individual, and it takes an action on the entire board to waive that. So just like your cities with your city attorneys, same situation. For the next set, I'm going to go through very quickly the board policy review. This is just to kind of give you an overview of what we have in place. Like I said, the board policies is really sort of our municipal code. This is where we implement our policies and procedures in the direction of the board. The first policies were adopted in 2012. Before that, we sort of had an official policies and procedures bylaws type book. We shifted that over and sort of codified everything in individual policies. We review these every year in the October-November timeframe for any regulatory or statutory changes that need to be incorporated, or just operational needs to update. As Matt likes to say, we do our good, better, best. So we're always striving to get things in a good place. Currently, we have 33 policies. I'm going to run through these fairly quickly, but if you have any questions, please stop me as we go through them. Go ahead. The first few are really just kind of the ground rule setting. The general provisions in board policy number 1, appointment to the board of directors, which we're going to do today, is established by board policy number 2. And board policy number 3 is the requirement for our external committees. And we currently have 3. We have our executive committee, the marketing, service planning, business development, which somehow translates to MISPIDA. And then we have the performance, administration, and finance, which is PATH. We have our rules of procedure, which dictate the conduct of our board meetings, and board policy number 4, public notice and participation, how we put everything out to the people, and adoption of our service changes ordinances. That's in board policy number 5. Number 6 is our ethics training. This is required by AB 1234, so you guys should be getting this with your cities. We will generally do a revisor as well every couple of years just to make sure we get everybody on that. And it also requires us to have our own code of conduct, which is, again, a requirement of state law.
Do you accept our?
Yeah, we don't require you to do ethics training twice. So if you do your 1, 2, 3, 4 training every 2 years through your city, then you should be good. If not, then we have it for our own staff that we set up generally through the state's website. So if you want to sit through that again, we can give you a code to log in.
Newspapers that are making me make sure I obey.
Our board member compensation and travel expense reimbursement is number 7. Our conflict of interest code, which is an extension of that AB 1234 training, that is in board policy number 8. This also houses our disclosure requirements for any statement of economic interest or Form 700 filer the district may have. So this is where we have our categories of classification. Currently, we have 6 categories of disclosure. Board policy number 9 is our investment policy, which dictates how we do our investments here at the district for reserves, and to make sure that we have sort of the maximum amount of liquidity that we can spare.
I have a question.
Yep.
Regarding number 8, there's conflict of interest. So if NCTD has something going on with one of our municipalities, who decides if there's a conflict? Like, do you sit out on the city side, or do you sit out on the NCTD side? Do the 2 attorneys talk, or do we decide, or what?
It really depends on the nature of the conflict.
Okay.
Yes, we do reach out to
Okay.
the city attorneys. Typically, what we've seen in the past is that the elected officials like to sit on their elected board and may sit out on the appointed board. So they'll sit with their city and they'll recuse themselves from the action on this side, although we've had it go the other way as well.
Okay.
So
The question, I guess, on the investment policy, could we get it at maybe a future board meeting? I won't have to go into the depths now. Maybe just kind of an overall presentation on the investment policy, reserve requirements, and things like that. I guess I'd like, we don't have to now, but I would like that in the near future.
So in March, mark your calendars. We're going to have a workshop. We're going to have PFM is going to come in and do a transit finance, and within that they will cover a lot of what you just said in terms of liquidity, investment policy, things along that line.
What's a PFM?
Financial consultant firm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, dates? You got to get in now.
Yeah, it's up. March board meeting.
Okay. Oh, March board meeting. Okay.
All right, go ahead. Next one. Our reserve funds are in board policy number 10. We have a targeted balance of 15 million right now. Our real estate use is board policy number 11. This deals with the disposition, acquisition, and incidental use of our property. Excess real property utilization is under board policy 12, what we do with surplus property, things like that.
Question
Yes.
on, and maybe, or maybe this is a question for budget down the road, but on number 10, targeted balance of 15 million, does that dollar amount change? I mean, I guess I'm used to like a percentage of a budget. You have a $15 million amount, you have whatever the budget is. If that budget goes up, does this 15 million go up?
We took out the percentage. Yeah, previously we had that percentage in. We took the percentage out and established it at the $15 million level. And if you look at our budget that Yoon showed, the budget was at $114 million. So we would still be at that percentage target that we were at formerly, 10%.
Okay, so if the budget one day goes up to $200 million or whatever, does this 15 million go up automatically? Or is it a board decision to raise the 15?
Yeah, that would be a board
Okay.
decision, and we have to balance. We have to balance those decisions because you'll see as we talk a little bit about our CAFR, our CFO. She will be able to address the question in terms of the amount of cash that we have relative to our overall budget, and you'll see we do have a significant amount of cash. One of the concerns is when you create these restricted pots. We, for example, right now are using that 50 parts of that $15 million to cash flow the purchase of our locomotives to avoid incurring debt or paying finance charges. And so one of the things that we've tried to evolve as staff over time is to strategically to use that money to save the district money long term, with a more so focus, and you'll see it in future policy revisions, on ever increasing the overall cash balance that we have.
So when's the opportunity to change that?
We review each of those every year in October, November timeframe, all policies. But anything brought to the board or raised by the board, we can change. Board policy 13s are advertising, concessions, and merchandising. This one establishes what can and cannot be advertised on our modes. So this is sort of our big free speech First Amendment policy. Board policy number 4, record management document control. This basically requires us to keep everything that we have similar to your cities. We have an electronic management system, and then the companion to that is our records retention policy, which is number 15. Our public records requests are handled through board policy 16. This is in compliance with state law. We're really held to the Public Records Act, so this just implements that for us. Budget development is established through board policy 19, along with the monitoring and controls. Railroad crossing quiet zones and wayside horn systems is handled through board policy 18. So when our cities ask, how do we do our wayside and our quiet zones, it's established through this policy here. As I mentioned before, board policy 19 is the delegation authority of the executive director from the board. This is the only delegation of authority. I know it's a little bit small in this, but I think you all have a copy. These are sort of the highlights. Generally contracts under $100,000, extensions, or amendments of contracts, so long as it doesn't exceed $50,000 cumulative. And again, so long as it's within that, it can be done at the executive director level. If it's not, then it does have to come to you as the board to approve. Complimentary transit passes. This is sort of our marketing tool to bring in new customers. Is policy number 20. 21, complimentary ADA paratransit program. This establishes sort of our paratransit program in terms of the high level decisions. Board policy number 2, service requests for evaluating that process. That's enabled there. Board policy number 23, railroad construction schedule. I bring this up because it has been an issue that's come up over the last year because of all the construction that has been happening on our right of way. We do have a policy on that to establish a year-long absolute work window schedule or AWW schedule, because we do shut down the entire railroad, nothing travels. And so it is a big impact to not only our services, but freight services as well. So this is the reason why it's difficult sometimes to handle things that come up quickly, but there is a policy for establishing those. Board policy number 24 is the employee drug and alcohol policy. This is really intended to comply with federal mandates for specific operators. So this is our DOT and FTA compliant drug-free, alcohol-free workplace. Board 25 is the disadvantaged business enterprise. This again implements that federal mandate because of our funding. Discrimination complaint procedure. This is our really in conjunction with board policy 27 and our equal employment and our civil rights implementation. And then fraud prevention and whistleblower protections is very, very similar to a lot of what your cities have in the municipal code. Our asset management plan is under board policy 29. This is how we address all of the things that we have as a district, their useful life, and how we acquire and retire those. And then our threshold for major service change is established in board policy 30, and this impacts how we modify routes and other things. Number 31, threshold for disparate impact on minority populations. This is that equal justice implementation. Again, a requirement of federal law, a requirement of CEQA. And then threshold for disproportionate burden on low-income populations. This is the same thing to make sure that our services don't favor one population over another, that we're treating everybody equally fairly. And then last but not least, we have the joint use of development of real property. This establishes how we can best manage and develop the property that we have, along with private contractors and private bids. And this implements not only federal requirements if it's a FTA funded asset, but also just the general policy of the board. So I know that was a whirlwind because there were 33 of them. We only had 22 minutes to get through it. But if there are any questions on that, please let me know. And we'll be going into a lot of these in much more detail as each item kind of comes up in the future for the board.
And then we will have time during the retreat to discuss this. And Matt, did you want to tell the rest of the board too what the date is of the retreat? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to cover it under the executive director's
Perfect. Okay,
report.
Okay. All right. Okay. So just stay tuned for that.